You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome back, everybody. Your host, Michael, third stream for the day. And pleased to note that we have co-hosts Eric Ibarra and William Albrecht on the show, both at the same time. Great to have you gentlemen on. How are y'all?
Great. It's an enormous privilege to be back on.
Yeah, doing great. Thrilled to be back with you, Michael. Thrilled to be back with you, Eric. I can't wait to begin. Going to have a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, and we have Dr. James Likoudis on the line. Dr. Likoudis, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
Welcome back to the show. How are you?
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you back. We're debriefing you on your debate with Ubi Petrus recently on the papacy. I had a chance to listen to the debate and really enjoyed it. Let's go ahead and just kind of get your overall thoughts on how you think it went according to you.
Well, it was interesting, no question. I did not get the opportunity. There was a change of emphasis in the program to discuss how simple people, ordinary folk, can discover the true church amidst the chaos of churches and sects. I've often been approached by the plain ordinary man, so to speak, who believe, at least from reading the New Testament, that Christ did found a church, but are troubled and baffled by the obvious divisions among Christians, all claiming to know what Christianity was all about. Now, it didn't take a rocket scientist, much less the ordinary person, to realize that every Protestant group, from now over 36,000 in number, and probably more, could not have been founded by Christ and taught by the apostles, who formed the first Christian communities. They were over 1,500 years too late on the historical scene to pretend to have been founded by Christ and to know his mind concerning the mysterious truths he came to reveal. Moreover, no Protestant community even claimed to be exclusively the one and only visible church, tracing its origins to Christ and the apostles. Protestantism seemed to be simply a chaotic religious mess that was unworthy of anyone's belief. However, there were some Protestants quite prejudiced against the Catholic Church by centuries of anti-Catholic polemics, who sought to find an anchor in ancient Christian belief and practice. They thought that the venerable Eastern Orthodox churches could be the refuge in a time of apostasy affecting millions of Christians. They accepted, I would say, uncritically, the claim of the 14 autocephalous, that is, independent, churches of the Byzantine tradition to have maintained the orthodoxy of the church during the first millennium, that is, before the Great Schism with Rome. And then we have certain Catholics who were disenchanted by the liturgical and doctrinal disorders in the Catholic Church. They too became attracted to Eastern Orthodoxy by Orthodox websites on the internet, which claimed that the communion of patriarchs and bishops were in fact identical with the church. They claimed they had remained the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church after the Pope and Catholics became heretical with their addition of a filioque clause to the Nicene Creed of 381. And Catholics have introduced many other alleged heterodox innovations in doctrine and practice. Now, I've always maintained it is, of course, possible for anyone to examine each doctrine in dispute between Catholics and Orthodox and discover that the Catholic position is well-founded in both Scripture and the tradition of the Church, as manifested in the writings of the Fathers and the 7 ecumenical councils. Catholic writers like Eric Ibarra, with his 600-page tome examining all the historical difficulties alleged against papal supremacy and papal infallibility. So Catholic scholars have demonstrated for centuries of great learning in examining the irrational and tragic nature of the Greco-Slav schism, which tore millions of Orthodox from the visible unity of the Church, founded on Peter the Rock. To sum up very quickly, I'd like to read what one Orthodox correspondent wrote me. I am in agony in trying to decide which is the true Church, Catholic or Orthodox. I'm not a scholar to try and weigh and try to unravel all the conflicting arguments used by Catholics and Orthodox writers over centuries. I don't know Greek. I don't know Latin and Syriac. I know nothing about ecumenical councils and the disputes of bishops concerning them. I can't be expected to resolve the disagreements among scholars regarding the history of the schism and who is to be blamed for it. Can you help? I replied to him and said, well, yes, there must be, and there is an easy way to find the visible church Christ founded for the salvation of all. The root of scholarship is not the only way to find the true church, which is one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. That is what is read in the famous Creed of 381 AD, which both Catholics and Orthodox profess, and which our Lord himself declared to be a city on top of the mountain, visibly viewed by all seekers of truth, troubled by scandalous divisions among Christians. That easy way divides both the erudite scholar and the plain ordinary person with absolute certitude that it is the Catholic Church, which is the one and only church. Pardon?
No, we didn't say anything. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is the plain ordinary person, as well as the scholar, can find with absolute certitude that it is the Catholic Church, which is the one and only church Christ established. It solves the burning question that the Orthodox themselves find unable to answer. Where is the true church when patriarchs and bishops divide on questions of faith and morals? That's the same burning question that needed to be answered every time there was a major crisis in the church, when heresies and schisms broke out, like the Arians in the 4th century, the Nestorians in the 5th, the Monophysites in the 5th century, the Monothelites in the 6th century, the Iconoclasts in the 7th century, and the Byzantine Greek schism led by the See of Constantinople from the 11th to the 15th century. This last schism continuing to our own day. I would note that all these breakaways from the true church was by patriarchs and bishops and their theologians, often very able dialecticians. It took a St. Athanasius to unravel all the difficult arguments brought by the heretic Arius. All these heretics, incidentally, argued from both scripture and tradition to justify their heresy and schism. The same burning question now troubles many Orthodox who find their patriarchs and bishops have broken communion with each other as the result of the schism occurring between Constantinople and Moscow over the Ukraine. So what party then is to be considered the true church? The bishops that side with Constantinople or the bishops that side with Moscow? How can the ordinary Orthodox person now resolve that baffling problem?
Okay.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doctor.
The major question I would simply add here: what is the rule of faith that provides an easy way for both learned and unlearned to find the true church amid the chaos of conflicting claims between Catholics and heretics and schismatics? What is that rule of faith provided by Christ himself that would resolve that question?
Okay. William, I'm going to ask you to jump in here with your comments and questions. And by the way, I can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
My bad.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry about that. Y'all able to hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Dr. Likoudis, we are thrilled to have you here because I got to tell you, from what I was able to hear of that debate, you were fantastic. You were charitable. You were knowledgeable. You were sharp. Y'all able to hear me fine?
Yeah.
Okay. You were quick on your feet. Very, very impressed with you, Dr. Likoudis. But before we do hop in, though, and begin talking about maybe intricacies or details about the debate, one thing that I couldn't help but notice was your presentation during the debate did not have any slideshows. I found that a little bit odd. Were you told beforehand, before the debate happened, that slideshows were going to be added for Ubi Petrus? Were you given an opportunity to add your own?
I don't think he mentioned that, but I had no objection to him adding anything that he wanted, because I figured the conversation was pretty well over when he reduced all his difficulties to the Catholic position by calling them suggestions. I don't understand what that word even means.
Yeah, well, to really good point there, Dr. Likoudis. I agree with you. The debate was over rather early. It was over rather early. You were charitable noting that it was over early. You did a great job defending the ancient position of the church. And on that very same point, I heard that particular argument brought up. We briefly looked at the documents, and we were kind of really perplexed a bit on the suggestions. So if maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What claims did and I'm rather than refer to him as Ubi Petrus, which is a bogus name, I'm going to refer to him as an anonymous individual. We don't know who he is. So this anonymous individual who you were dialoguing with, by the way, you did a fantastic job. What argument was levied in terms of suggestions? And what are your comments on that, Dr. Likoudis?
What was that? Repeat it.
Yeah, what argument did he make about suggestions? And what are your thoughts on that? Because I heard when he brought up the arguments on there being papal suggestions, I could hear that you were perplexed, but not perplexed in the sense of being stumped, but rather perplexed because of the nonsensical nature of the comments being made. Can you maybe touch upon those comments that were made?
Well, he quoted Pope Agatho and put on the screen Pope Agatho's exact words concerning his primacy of authority and universal jurisdiction in the church. And to call that suggestion instead of the plain meaning of the words affirming what he denied, the truth of papal authority in the early church. Agatho made no qualms about what he believed to be the common belief of the Catholic Church concerning his primacy of authority and universal jurisdiction. I don't know why he doesn't understand or didn't understand the meaning of words.
Yep.
And to call what Agatho said concerning his own petrine primacy in the church as suggestion simply belies the fact of what he was stating. He was expressing the common belief of the Church, the whole Catholic Church, concerning the Petrine primacy of authority and jurisdiction over the churches of the East as well as the West. So to reduce all that to suggestion, I don't know what that means. The words of Agatho are clear to anybody who can read.
Yeah, and I thought that was a very strong point that you did definitely bring up, that the words were very clear. I've read scholars and their comments in terms of Pope Agatho, and I totally agree with you on that point. I heard as you attempted to press him for any kind of evidence for his position, and what I've gathered, Dr. Likoudis, and I gathered that the anonymous gentleman that you were dialoguing with, by the way, I do want to commend that gentleman, that in front of the audience, the debating audience, he seemed to be rather charitable to you. I will commend him for that. To me, what I gather is the anonymous gentleman that you debated has a limited grasp of Catholic theology. From what I have heard, his arguments in the papacy, his arguments about Catholicism, they don't seem to be cogent to me. Do you gather that maybe he just really doesn't understand the intricacies of the papacy? Why else would anyone make such elementary mistakes? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Likoudis?
Well, he didn't understand, obviously. He doesn't understand Catholic doctrine concerning papal primacy and infallibility. All he had to do to understand is to read what Vatican I and Vatican II stated very clearly, in very plain, simple language, what the papacy is all about. It's the visible head of the Catholic Church. He doesn't seem to understand that if you believe the Church is a visible society, it must have a visible head. I don't know any thing in creation that has a visible body that doesn't have a visible head. He doesn't seem to be able to grasp that. And Christ's establishment of a visible head for his church, he seems to consider simply a suggestion. It's not a suggestion. It's the way he structured the Holy Church, with a visible head, with special prerogatives concerning faith and morals.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. Really good points. And before I do pass it on over to Eric, by the way, who has joined us, we're thrilled that Eric is here. Before I do pass it on over to Eric, I agree with you. We briefly looked at the Greek of that particular term, and I'm totally on board with you, Dr. Likoudis. Really doesn't make any sense, the kind of argument that he is making. But I want to commend you again in a bit when we go around and we talk a little bit more. Look forward to dialoguing with you a little bit more. And I do want to let the audience know that Dr. Likoudis is a fantastic individual on this particular topic. He has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to Eastern Orthodoxy. And I remember the very evening after your debate was over, I talked to you over the phone. You sounded thrilled about the debate. You sound very sharp tonight as well. You're fast in responses. You're fast on your feet. And I want to commend you for the incredible work that you are doing for the church, Dr. Likoudis. Really a pleasure to have you here. And I want to pass it over to my brother, Eric, now.
Dr. Likoudis, it's an enormous privilege to share the stage with you again once more. I do want to say that I thought that you did excellent. So I'm just going to copy what William said there. And, I just want to add that I was very impressed by how well you were able to interweave certain problems within the Orthodox authority paradigm in relation to both past and present issues in Orthodox ecclesiology. I thought that was excellent to weave into your opening statement, I guess you could call it. It wasn't really a formatted debate, but you were given an extended opening, and I think that the debate topic was a very interesting one, because Saint Agatho's letter to Emperor Constantine the Fourth is one of those you know very clear statements to papal supremacy, papal infallibility, and uh, I've never come across someone trying to make the claim that the Greek word anaphora, or the Latin suggestione, somehow implied that it was just an sort of like a suggestion that the Pope wrote to the emperor, um, or that the letter from the Roman Synod that Agatho presided over was just like a suggestion. Today when we use the word suggestion, this is like it's like I'm gonna pitch an option for everyone to consider. And I could be wrong, I could be right, it might be acceptable, it might be unacceptable. That's a suggestion. However, I wanted to share a translation of part of uh, Saint Agatho's letter through the Roman Synod, which the council does call anaphora, suggestione, or suggestion. Am I able to share my screen, Michael?
Yeah.
Because I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
go
that way
ahead.
the audience can see
Sure.
what I'm referring to.
Yeah, when you
here.
send it over, I'll accept it. Looking for it.
Did it come through yet?
No.
Okay, let me see. Window.
Okay, there it is.
Okay. So this is actually a portion from the letter that was written to the council from Rome, Agatho being the presider of that synod. Dr. Likoudis, you can't see this if you're not watching it, but later on, if you watch this, you'll be able to see it. And you'll be able to hear me cite this quotation. And you tell me if this sounds like a suggestion in the modern sense. This is the Roman Synod to the council. Whichever of the bishops wishes to preach sincerely together with us what is contained in the profession of our lowliness regarding our apostolic faith, we receive them as of one mind with us, as fellow priests, fellow ministers, as having the same faith, and to speak clearly as our spiritual brothers and fellow bishops. But those who do not wish to make this profession of faith with us, we judge them as enemies of the Catholic and Apostolic profession of faith, to be liable to eternal condemnation. Nor would we ever receive them, ever, in the college of our lowliness, unless they have amended. Nor should any of them suppose that we have transgressed against what we have received from those who have gone before us. Close quote. That's Mansi 11, 297, column A and B. And I got this English translation from a wonderful monograph, the title of which is The Ecclesiology of Saint Nicephorus, 758 to 828, Pentarchy and Primacy. I have a selection here from the Greek and the Latin. This is 297, page 297, 298 for the Latin side, A and B, the two columns here. So I'll stop sharing. But Dr. Likoudis, hopefully you heard that. To me, that clearly sounds like a condemning law that the Roman Synod is writing to the council, not a mere suggestion. What do you think?
You're absolutely correct. And I think, in other words, Agatho makes very clear that the See of Rome has never failed in professing the true faith. And the
Right.
same can be found in a marvelous quotation from Hadrian I in the Seventh Ecumenical Council, where he makes the very same claim. How you can reduce what are plain words concerning the Pope's confession concerning his primacy in the Church with suggestions seems to me ludicrous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Ubi
think
Petrus, by the way, solved its own problem with its axiom. Where Peter is, there is the church. Exactly. Where the visible head of the church is, there is the church. Where there is Peter, there is the church. And that Peter is the visible head whom Christ established with the hierarchical structure of the church. And they are not suggestions. Matthew 16, 18, 19 is not a suggestion. Luke 22, 31 to 33 is not a suggestion. John 21, 15, 17. In all those words of Christ, we find Christ declaring Peter alone to be the rock of the entire church, the bearer of the keys of the kingdom, the keys being the very symbol of supreme authority, the confirmer of the brethren, and commissioned as the chief pastor to feed all the lambs and sheep of Christ's one flock. These are not suggestions. These are commands of Christ, giving Peter alone certain privileges which have become known as papal supremacy and papal infallibility in the truth. Obviously, Christ's church was destined to last till the end of the world. The gates of hell cannot prevail against it. That's the promise of indefectibility in faith and morals, and is found in the visible governing structure of Peter and the apostles through their successors, the bishops. And those are not suggestions, but the overwhelming historical testimony of the church's history from its very beginning. Look at the unbroken succession of the bishops of Rome, from Peter to Linus to Clement to Damasus to Celestine to Leo the Great to Gelasius to Hadrian I to Agatho to Nicholas the Great to Leo the IX. They all profess a supremacy of universal and authority and jurisdiction over all the churches of East and West, making up the Catholic Communion.
Yes, amen. The other thing I wanted to bring up was that Ubi Petrus brought up the fact or the claim that Pope Pelagius I, the successor to Vigilius, officially signed off on the decrees which had basically excommunicated Pope Vigilius. But the history around that is not it's not as a strong a foundation to bring that point up as if it's unquestionable, because I was reading through the translation and commentary of the Council of Constantinople 553 by Richard Price. And in the first volume, it's 2 volumes in one bind. In the first volume, page 104, actually, you should probably read, obviously the whole thing for the listeners. Truly recommend this to the listeners. But on pages 98 to 107, if you just read through that carefully, Richard Price, Father Richard Price, mentions how there's 2 Latin versions of the Council of Constantinople. One of those versions is the longer version, the first version it's called. The second version is a shorter version, and in particular, it has the excommunication of Vigilius completely cleansed out of it. And so that second version of the Latin acts of that council is the scholars I've looked at seem pretty convinced that the copies of the acts that Vigilius and Pelagius took home when Justinian finally allowed Vigilius to get on a boat and go back. Obviously, he died in Sicily, as well known. But the copies that Vigilius and Pelagius, who accompanied him, would have most likely been the second edition because it's processed from the first one. And so there's Byzantinist Evangelist Chrysos, who's a prolific writer on Byzantine history. He is very much in support of this explanation of the story. He draws from a German scholar, Johannes Stampf, who he wrote a prefatory in the original Latin, the Acta of the council that Richard Price draws his translation from. In his prefatory, he goes through all the intricacies between these two Latin versions. And long story short, I don't want to give a whole lesson on all the intricacies here, but Father Price relies on Evangelos Chrysos, and who he relies on, one of the go-to Latin copies, translations of the council. And he relies on them to show that in the Roman archives, the second shorter edition of the Acts is what was saved in Rome. And so if that's the case, then Pelagius didn't ratify the council that included the excommunication of Pope Vigilius. So even if that's somewhat disputable, it certainly wasn't the fact that we have this two versions of the Acts, the second one being definitely, intended to salvage the reputation of Vigilius. I think that Ubi should have been a little bit less hasty in trying to make this point about Vigilius's excommunication.
I think you're absolutely correct in your analysis. Incidentally, Pope Vigilius, who was much maligned, wrote a beautiful letter concerning the primacy of Peter in the church. And that too often has been forgotten. The Emperor Justinian treated him abominably.
Yeah, and that council,
excommunication. The excommunication of Vigilius was absolutely wrong, and illicit, and had no effect whatsoever.
Yeah, a lot of scholars look back upon that council and, particularly note the Caesaro-Papist aggression that went into the process, and I know that sometimes historians point out some of the aggression that took place at Florence, Lyons, 1274. But if we go back, these imperial councils, the ecumenical councils in the first millennium, you really see the emperor usurping his, what he thought was his right, obviously. But it certainly is questionable today. I don't think the Orthodox today, on a large scale, would consider a council where the emperor calls it, deposes the Patriarch of Alexandria, threatens the Patriarch of Jerusalem, kidnaps the Patriarch of Rome, deposes the Archbishop of Carthage, and writes his own edicts of theology. I don't think the Orthodox today would accept something like that. But when we go back in history, I think they should be consistent and also criticizing some of that methodology that went into that council.
Well, when you read the actual writing of all the popes that I listed, they all affirm the primacy of Peter in the sense that the Catholic Church holds and teaches today. Now, they may be wrong, and you can argue with them all you want, but the historical record is clear that they profess Catholic truth in their time, and that truth has not changed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Likoudis. I'm going to pass it over to Michael. Now. I'm sure he's got a lot of thoughts that he's gleaned from this. But again, thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Likoudis. And we'll probably pick up on a phone conversation again soon.
I do have a question, Dr. Likoudis. I think y'all did a really good job at establishing that Ubi's argument there with the term suggestion is not a very good one. However, for those who would note that, well, New Advent, for example, translates the term there as suggestion. Why do you think it does so if it doesn't in fact mean suggestion?
I have no idea. The words of Pope Agatho are certainly clear. The words of all the pontiffs I've referred to are absolutely clear. They were not making suggestions. They were expressing the common belief of the whole church.
Could it be
Christ
that this
did not
was
make suggestions?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it could be that this was a pretty old English translation? To my knowledge, it's not pretty new. So perhaps the English term suggestion meant something slightly different than what it means in contemporary English language today. Do you think that might be the case?
Christ made a suggestion when he said he was establishing a church. Is that church still around? Is the church something invisible rather than something visible that can be seen? I don't understand what suggestion means in this context. Well, it has nothing to do with the clear words of Christ and the popes concerning the Petrine primacy in the church.
I agree. I think what he was doing is he was capitalizing and getting fixated on outdated English translation that Catholics use on New Advent, where it uses the term translation. But I think it's, like I said, an outdated translation. And when it was translated into English, the term suggestion did not necessarily mean what it means today in contemporary English. And I think y'all did a pretty good job at showing that that's probably not the best way to translate it in English at this point, given the context.
Well, I would agree.
I want to ask y'all for some comments and questions here in just a little bit. Go ahead and send them to @ReasonInTheology. Dr. Likoudis, let me ask you this before we get to some of the Q&A, though. Would you maybe comment on some of the other things that you felt were weaknesses in his argumentation? We discussed a few of them, but maybe some of the things that we haven't touched on yet. Was there anything else?
No, I think he made his major point. He did not raise others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. William, did you have any questions before I go ahead and jump over to the Q&A that I'm seeing? It's starting to come through, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Sure. I think to really highlight a very good point that Dr. Likoudis brought up, and I want to really bring it forth for the audience in case, because I know a lot of the times we tend to talk about things and we gloss over them, then we move to another topic. But he brought up a really good point that I think has got to be really repeated. And I'm really going to only repeat what he said because he brought it up in the debate, and I thought it was a fantastic point. And it's been brought out tonight even by Eric. Eric has done one incredible job. I think he has made the show tonight by virtue of sharing those images. Eric, thank you so much for that. You've been incredible, as you usually are, brother. And what a beautiful service you've done for the faithful there as well, Eric. And Dr. Likoudis, the points that you brought up, the fact that in Holy Writ, these are not suggestions. You are correct. I mean, you look at John chapter 21, where St. Peter is essentially called there to be the shepherd of the church, of the faithful, and not any kind of regular shepherd, but the head shepherd over the faithful. That particular Greek word utilized there for the great St. Peter, looking in Matthew chapter 16, looking in Luke, looking in all these areas, none of these are suggestions. And I think that is the most important point we have got to bring forth. It is a point you brought up in your incredible job you did in the debate. And I know people tend to then wonder, how did Dr. Likoudis do in debate? Let me tell the audience that are wondering, go hear the debate, go hear it, judge for yourself. I'm going to tell you right now, I am very fair in the way I assess debates. I've been debating for a long time, and I've been honest with the brother Michael and with Eric when I've heard other people debate on the topic of the papacy, and I have not been impressed at times in the past. Nobody in particular, but I'll hear a person debate and I'm not impressed. I'll point it out on various topics, not only the papacy, but when I heard you debate this topic, when I heard you defend this beautiful doctrine, Dr. Likoudis, I was impressed. You were sharp. You were fantastic. And I pray for your health. I pray the Lord continue to strengthen you so you can continue to win debates the way you won this one in a convincing fashion. It was, as you said, it was over early.
Well, thank you.
Doctor.
Thank you very much for those kind words.
Doctor, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I saw a question here, but if you had something to say, go ahead and do so.
I would simply say the Orthodox keep repeating, almost mantra-like, that they constitute the true church. And I find that over and over again, they present to listeners and readers the following question and answer. Question: where is the true church? Answer: where there is the Orthodox faith. Question: where is the Orthodox faith? Answer: with the Orthodox Church. Question: which is the Orthodox Church? And answer: the Church with the Orthodox faith. Who does not see that this is a circular argument that has no resolution? In the church of the first 1,000 years, the true church was not identified as the Orthodox Church. The word Orthodox is not found in the creed, referring to belief in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. It is the Catholic Church that bears the glorious name Catholic, and it is the one church, not 14 to 16 autocephalous churches, which has been known by that exclusive name by both Catholics and the various heretics and schismatics across the ages. The Catholic Church was always the church in every age that was easily identified as the true church by both the simple and scholarly as the one church in communion with the Bishop of Rome, the successor of Peter on the chair of unity. In other words, the easy way to find the true church for any normal, rational person is to find the church with the visible head that Christ established for it. It's wonderful to go to all these scholarly debates about the word suggestion, but that's all a distraction from the easy way where both scholars and the simple-minded can find the true church with no difficulty.
Dr. Likoudis, the other guy, is asking a question here. He asks, what is the best quote or evidence for the papacy in the first century?
In the first century, you've got the letter of Clement to the church in Corinth. Why is the Church of Rome writing a church so distant from it in Asia, namely the Church of Corinth? What better proof is there of the Roman Church exercising its authority in the East than the letter of Clement? Then, of course, you've got Pope Victor and Pope Stephen, all referring to their authority in the church as the successor of Peter. Some of the bishops didn't like it, but the popes were expressing the common belief of the church that the Pope had authority over the Eastern churches as well as the West. And you come up to Pope Leo the Great in the 5th century, it's absolutely overwhelming what the Pope declares concerning his Petrine primacy of authority and universal jurisdiction. And all its successors did the same to this very day.
Connor asks the following question. What would the other side point to as their strong points in the debate, especially considering they, in Ubi's comment section, are acting like they clearly won?
Well, the Orthodox always have had a sort of superior mentality to the barbarians in the West. It was not surprising that they exercised that mentality.
Elijah asks,
You've got Orthodox theologians who freely admit, by the way, like I mentioned on the program, great scholar Olivier Clement, who freely admits that in the early church, the popes claimed what they possess and claim now. So it's all a question of objectivity and going where the scholarship leads you to. The Orthodox have suppressed many of the testimonies of the Pope. You never see them in their writings. The ones that do freely admit that the Catholic claim of universal authority in the early church was correct.
There's a question here from Elijah Halberg. I'm an Eastern Orthodox and looking into Catholicism. What are good resources and things to read that you would recommend?
Well, it's a great treatise on the church by Cardinal Journet, which deals with Eastern Orthodoxy. The book by Aidan Nichols on the Eastern churches is also a fine book. Because I have my own books, 4 books on Eastern Orthodoxy, which unfortunately are out of print, but perhaps they still can be found on some of the online websites.
The next question here, let's see.
The classic, by the way, by Adrian Fortescue, The Orthodox Eastern Church remains a classic.
The other one here, well, some of these are somewhat repetitive. Let's see. Okay, here's one from Michael Donahue. Could you just one more time answer How could the unlearned identify the Catholic Church to be true?
Well, if they read the words of Christ to Peter concerning making him the rock of the church, the holder of the keys, the confirmer of the brethren, and the chief pastor of the church in his stead, what more evidence do you need? What do those words mean? How do you explain the existence of the papacy today? If it was such a master stroke of Satan and the Antichrist, how is it still is there today to be seen by the entire world as the living institutional hierarchical church established by Christ? As one Orthodox said, freely admitting, if the papacy is not the work of God, then it must be the work of the devil, and that it is not.
The next question here is from Patrick. Recent popes such as Francis, Benedict XVI, John Paul II have engaged in ecumenical events such as Assisi, where they prayed with non-Catholics at non-Catholic temples. Do these actions disprove the papacy, in your opinion?
No.
All right.
The church has the right to lessen its strictures on prayer with non-Catholics. Vatican II changed the discipline of the church in that regard. And so it's quite legitimate. Of course, it does not sanction any kind of false ecumenism with common prayer with non-Catholics. But it can be allowed, and it is. Some people try to be more strict than the church itself.
All right. Looking to see if there's any other final questions.
Remember what those prayers were for. Mm-hmm. Generally, they were for peace in the world. And there's nothing wrong with praying for that.
There's one other question on here. Agatho, in both of his letters, always exemplifies humility, lowliness, things like that. Do you think when he wrote suggestion, it was language that was indicative of humility and nothing else?
Well, it's the humble person who sometimes has the greatest insight into the truth. And the humble person, above all, must profess the truth concerning Christ's holy mysteries. And that's what Pope Agatho did, in reminding the emperor and the bishops that he is the visible head of the church and must be followed in declarations on faith and morals. You have many testimonies on the part of bishops and archbishops concerning the Pope's indefectibility in the faith, and that there can be no ecumenical council without the participation and ratification of the council by the Pope. How could that be if there was no special authority granted the Pope by Christ himself?
There's a question here from James. Would you debate Ubi again?
No.
And why is that?
What would be the purpose of it?
Trying to see if there's any others. I think we got to them all. If I missed anything, go ahead and send it now at Reason and Theology. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and end it there. Eric, did you have any final questions?
No, I just want to reiterate that I'm enormously grateful to speak with Dr. Likoudis, and look forward to doing it again soon.
William, any final questions there?
Dr. Likoudis, we were thrilled to have you on. It was great having you on, being able to dialogue with you. We look forward to having you on many more times in the future, God willing. And I do look forward to dialoguing with you over the phone again sometime in the future. We will continue praying for you, the incredible work that you're doing for the church. Thank you for joining us. We've had an incredible evening dialoguing with you, my friend.
Thank you, William. And thank you, Eric. By the way, Eric, when your book is published, it will be a tremendous asset to the church. Yours is the kind of scholarship that the church badly needs.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very humbled to hear that. I'm thrilled and just awesome to hear that. So I appreciate your kind and generous words.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on, Dr. Likoudis. We really appreciate your time. As William said, you're welcome on anytime.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Absolutely.
You have a wonderful website.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And great programs.
Thank you. Thank you. That definitely means a lot, and I appreciate that you watch them as well. So thank you. All right, everybody. I appreciate y'all commenting and interacting there in the chat. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share this on your social media, and also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, if you want to get access to extra content and also support what we're doing. Until next time, God bless. All right, we are off the air, y'all.